This is the St. Thomas Aquinas on August 16, 2013 in Laos Ledge just off Cebu port. A cargo ship rammed into her, causing her to sink, and with it is either dead or missing by the hundred. This is the cargo ship MV Sulpicio Express 7. This is the ship that rammed into St. Thomas. This is how it looks after the collision. To the uninformed, the catastrophe that took place in Lawis Ledge on August 16, 2013 that caused the sinking of another ferry and causing death in hundreds is just one of those sea disasters that brought anguish in the past. But actually, this fateful accident highlights the bad practices in Philippine domestic shipping industry that should not have been allowed to perpetuate. It goes to say that this particular accident is a reflection of the quality of managers not only of Cebu port but also of the entire Philippine maritime industry. This sea accident that took lives in hundreds could not have happened if our maritime managers did their jobs. Being an archipelagic nation, the maritime transport system forms a large component of the nation's entire transport system. Therefore, the lack of a system to manage and regulate vessel movement in a congested port like Cebu indicates not only inefficiency in domestic shipping but also of the entire national system. My name is Joseph Arellano. I am a retired ship captain. My sea career started in 1973 when I was 19 years old and finally ended in 2011, age 57. I sail on foreign-owned ships, although once in a while I trade in the Philippines. This presentation is aimed at finding the causes of maritime catastrophes among local ships in order to recommend solutions to finally put an end to it. Let's start our investigation with these facts. Fact number one, the Philippines has a shipbuilding industry as early as the 13th century. Number two, Filipino seafarers started selling their wares in Europe as early as the 1700s. Number three, at present, the Philippines is the largest supplier of seafarers in the international trade. And fact number four, the Philippines, the first Philippine Republic was proclaimed in June 12, 1898. With this backdrop, we can only surmise that the archipelagic nation has in place a strong maritime statutes and infrastructure to regulate its domestic maritime industry. But the spate of sea accidents and disasters speak otherwise. Let me just warn you that the next images are gruesome. This is the ill-fated MV Doña Paz, colliding with the tanker loaded with petroleum products in December 1987. You can see in these images that fire totally decimated her, and with it are 4,350 lives. Taking with it 4,350 lives is one thing, and people jumping on burning sea is another. It's heart-rending. The Doña Paz is considered the worst peacetime maritime disaster in the world. It is considered as Asia's Titanic. Now, according to a Philippine Senate investigation conducted in November 2009, the Philippines has had 176 maritime accidents involving Philippine-registered vessels. 41 of these involved passenger ferries. That's an average of 7.3 accidents per year and 1.7 or nearly twice a year for passenger ferries. You see, one of the notable reasons that clouds investigations of maritime disasters is when a sector of the society that knew nothing of merchant shipping operation weighs in. Because of their ignorance, they limit themselves to matter they are familiar with, although it is not the direct cause of the accident. They highlight things that has nothing to do with the initial cause of the accident. An example to this is overloading. It is overloading that those without knowledge of the intricacies of ship operation would relate to. However, although unquestionably the casualty would have been a lot less if the ship loaded only to its design capacity, overloading did not directly cause the accident. This is grievously wrong because it conceals the root cause of the tragedy, leaving it unaddressed. This is MV Wisam Express 8. On September 18, 2011, it ran aground at Lipata Bank. Investigation showed the ship violated prescribed speed limit. On March 31, 2011, barely 6 months before MV Wisam Express 8 grounding, MV Super Ferry 2 collided with the MV General Romulo in the vicinity of Lawis Lake. It was found during investigation that both ships failed to observe Colreg, speed limit, and the use of TSS. Colreg is the rules of the roads at sea, while TSS means traffic separation scheme similar to a road on land. Note very well that these accidents took place in 2011, 2 years before the St. Thomas disaster. In other words, these are the very same reasons that caused the collision between St. Thomas and the Sulpicio Express 7. Now, why were the issues in the first accident left unaddressed to prevent the second one? But the bigger question is, why have these accidents taken place at Lawis Ledge? This is the channel between Cebu mainland and Mactan Island, which leads to Cebu port. At the very entrance of the channel is Lawis Ledge. To your left is Cebu mainland, and to your right is Mactan Island. This is Lawis Ledge, marking the entrance to the channel. Lawis Ledge is a rock in which lighthouse is sitting on top of it. To the west or northwest of Lawis Ledge is Lipata Bank, which are submerged rocks, so that to the untrained eye, Lipata Bank could hardly be distinguished. The distance between these two, Lipata Bank and Lawis Ledge, is 1.7 kilometers, as indicated by the red lines. The dotted red lines with arrows is the TSS or Traffic Separation Scheme, which is a two-way road at sea. On the right, as shown by the arrows, is the north or inbound lane, and on the left, again as shown by the arrows, is the south or outbound lane. Sandwiched between these two lanes is the separation zone to separate traffic and prevent collision. The red lines are mined to show relevant distances, and the circles to indicate buoys that actually do not exist. Now one may ask, why do ships collide if there is already a lane to separate them or to keep them from colliding against each other? Before answering that, let me explain the chart. Obviously, in the middle of the channel, or the white-colored one, is the deep water that ships may safely sail on. The green ones on the sides are shallow water that would endanger ships. Those in yellow color are patches of islands. Although during high tide, this shallow water area is totally underwater, during low tide, however, would be revealed as rocks. The areas in light blue are shallow water that attracts fishermen. Now the simple answer to the question on why ships collide, even after a means to prevent collision is in place, because the ships, do not observe rules. Repeat, ships in the domestic trade do not adhere to rules. They are even contemptuous of it. Similarly, Government agencies such as Coast Guard, the Marina, that implement rules are sleeping on their jobs. Okay, the first two nautical chart is the British Admiralty chart number 13, and the chart you are looking at right now is chart number 4447 by NAMRIA. NAMRIA is the mapping agency of the Philippines. Compare the two. The most distinguishing feature of NAMRIA published chart is the TSS. The traffic separation scheme was added only after the chart was published. There is nothing wrong with that. Nautical charts normally undergo correction after it is released to the market. What is anomalous is that the TSS has only two lanes. It has not the separation or safe zone to keep the ships in opposing directions away from each other, thereby eliminating collision. This is the first anomaly. Now, focus your attention at the green line laid down in the southbound lane because this is the second anomaly. This green line is the ship's course line. A course line is the intended ship's track. For the ship to safely arrive to its final destination, it has to stay close as possible to its course line. Notice very well that there is only one course line, which could only be construed as the southbound because it is occupying the southbound lane. However, if you look closely at the lower right-hand corner of the chart, there are two directions. One is 122, which is the ship's course out of Cebu, and on the other side of the line is the course when entering Cebu. Although it is not clear because you can see only the upper half of one number, this number is 3, and only a small portion of the next number is appearing, which could only be no other than 0. This set of number is 302, which is the reciprocal of 122. That is, 122 plus 180 is 302. 302 is the ship's course when entering Cebu. This is grievously wrong because the northbound course should have been plotted in the northbound lane of the TSS. This means when leaving Cebu, the ship is in the correct lane, but when entering Cebu, she is in the wrong lane. By the way, this chart is from the sister ship of the ship that sank. St. Thomas nautical chart, of course, sank with it. Now, the plotted course line is a reflection of the inefficiency of our government. Marina and the Coast Guard regularly inspect ships. Voyage plans and nautical charts as well as other nautical publications are inspection item. The highly anomalous course line on the map should have been noticed during inspection only if these government agencies knew what they are doing. Okay, now this is the MV General Romulo. It collided with MV Super Ferry 2 on March 31, 2011 in the vicinity of Lawi's Ledge. Investigation showed both vessels failed to observe call reg, safe speed, traffic separation scheme rules, and gross inaction to prevent collision. These accidents reflect the quality of people both in the government and the private sector because the same accident repeat themselves without any concrete actions from both of them. They have the power to prevent sea accidents only if they know what they are doing. One of the causes of the collision between General Romulo and the Super Ferry 2 was non-adherence to safe speed. This is also the most contentious issue in the collision between St. Thomas and the Sulpicio 7. Now, this is Colreg Regulation 6 Safe Speed. Those underlined are the ones that should have been applied to prevent collision. The key word in understanding safe speed is prevailing circumstances. The speed must be adjusted according to prevailing circumstances. This means 20 knots in open waters is safe speed, while a situation may arise in harbor wherein even 1 knot is not safe speed. Looking at the map, the area is fraught with danger. Therefore, circumstances demand that ships steaming in this area are to be in safe speed. The sea lane is narrow, there is not much room to maneuver, and it's full of fishing boats. Navigating a ship is just like driving a car. Speed up in the highway, but slow down when the traffic becomes dense. The vicinity of Lowes Ledge, as you can see, is fraught with danger. If this were a car, it is in the vicinity of a marketplace wherein pedestrians, bicycles, tricycles come from all directions, not to mention sidewalk vendors taking the space for vehicles. In this situation, drastic reduction of speed is the wisest and safest thing to do. It is only fundamentally logical that slower speed allows time to react. Suffice to say that the ships that collided were in a location that demands them to be in safe speed. This is a statement from a representative of Sulpicio Lines using the ship's full speed to justify the action of Sulpicio 7. This is grievously wrong because, considering the location of the collision, speed in full contributed to the collision. This is from Captain Bermejo, which, just like the preceding, the other ship, shows their ignorance of Colregs. This brings us to another facet of Philippine domestic shipping that underlines not only much of the catastrophes in the Philippine waters, but also the hopelessness of Philippine domestic shipping industry. The collision between St. Thomas Aquinas and Sulpicio 7 on August 16, 2013 highlights the bad practices in domestic shipping industry that perpetuated itself due to the incompetence, inefficiency, and ineptitude of those charged with overseeing and policing the industry. You are looking at a VHF, or very high frequency radio. It is the primary mode of ship-to-ship, ship-to-shore, and shore-to-ship voice communication. In the Philippines, when two ships meet, one would call the other through the VHF to propose a course of action to avoid collision. In the international trade, this is called VHF navigation, which is discouraged. Repeat, this is discouraged because it defeats the very essence of the rules of the road. The rules of the road are fundamentally adequate for it to be able to handle normal circumstances. Admittedly, though, Colreg has limitations, making it unavoidable at times to contact the other guy to clarify the other guy's intention. However, these circumstances necessitating the need to speak to the other ship are markedly few. In other words, the use of VHF marine navigation is not the norm. But in the Philippines, this is the norm. I know it because I often experience it when calling Philippine ports. Now, this is the explanation on why VHF navigation is dangerous for it to be discouraged. There is no certainty that both vessels are on the same frequency or channel. Similarly, interference could render VHF ineffective. Actually, there are several possibilities that may hamper the proper use of voice communication through the VHF, or some unplanned events that may render the VHF ineffective. For example, those who are sensitive to noise may choose to reduce the volume to a level that those on the bridge hardly hear it. This is wrong, but there are also times when reducing the VHF volume happens accidentally. Therefore, VHF navigation is a bad practice that has to be eliminated. We have seen the detriment of VHF or radio communication to safety of navigation. However, as we can see from the government people investigating the collision, ask questions on the matter of radio communication to prevent collision as if nothing is wrong with it, which is an indication of their qualification to perform their jobs. As we can see from these statements from the government people who are supposed to police the industry, they are even endorsing it, which is an indication of their ignorance of the law. Sorry, not the law, but navigation rules and regulations. Now, these news clippings took place just minutes before the collision. If these were all true, as claimed by both parties, it reveals the confusion on account of a practice that should never have been allowed. Instead of frantically calling the other ship, both ships could have executed evasive actions as detailed in the rules of the road. Now, the next slide is Colreg Rule 8, which is simple and straightforward. According to it, under the circumstances, reducing speed or stopping is the only means to avoid collision. The reason why they did not reduce speed shall be explained later. One of the contentions during the collision between St. Thomas Aquinas and Sulpicio Siete is the traffic separation scheme on who was on the correct lane and who was on the wrong lane. The irony, however, is that the causes of this collision are the same that had caused the same collision that took 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, between General Romulo and Super Ferry 2. Nothing was done to correct it to prevent them from recurring. In the international trade, international regulations and conventions were the result of catastrophes at sea. In other words, they learned from their mistake. 25 years after Doña Paz, the same catastrophe visits us on a regular basis. It only implies we have not the ability to learn. Let us look further on why several accidents have taken place in Lawi's Ledge. Cebu is the hub of the Visayas and to a certain extent of Mindanao. Not only are her universities to Visayan-speaking people come to attend to, but also in entertainment. In terms of passenger and vessel movement, Cebu by far is the biggest port in the country, which only means Cebu port to be a very busy and congested port. It's not any different from our streets that become smaller by the year due to the unabated increase in the number of cars and its undisciplined users. Aggravating the traffic in Lawi's Ledge is the construction of Marcelo Fernan Bridge, inaugurated in August 1999. The construction of this bridge shows how short-sighted Filipinos are. This bridge is only the second bridge to connect Mactan Island to Cebu mainland. Cebu Port could be accessed through two channels. These are Lawi's Ledge in the south and Bantolino Point in the north. Please refer to the map. Bantolino Point is encircled with red. The old Mandawi-Mactan Bridge has enough clearance to accommodate large vessels. So that prior to the construction of the Marcelo Fernan Bridge, Cebu Port is accessible through two sea lanes. However, the new Marcelo Fernan Bridge was constructed lower than the old one, limiting the size and therefore the number of ships using the northern entrance. This resulted in increased number of ships using the southern entrance. More traffic increases risk. Aside from risk, the height of Marcelo Fernan Bridge is economically unwise. Coming from the north, the Petron oil depot is located just before the old bridge. Prior to the construction of Marcelo Fernan Bridge, foreign tanker ships calling Petron accessed Petron from the north. Now with the new bridge, that's the Marcelo Fernan Bridge, which is so low so that large ships cannot pass through it, uh, these ships have to enter through Lawi's Ledge. Now, because of the new bridge, during high tide, ships calling Petron have to wait for low tide for them to safely pass the old bridge. I know this because it happened to me on at least 2 occasions. In shipping, time is money. I said the construction of the new bridge shows how short-sighted Filipinos are because it is bad for business. It is a disservice to Filipino people because it's so economically unwise. For a busy seaport like Cebu, a vessel traffic management system should have been in place to regulate and manage vessel movement. If the station of public utility transport jeepney or FX has dispatcher to manage and regulate traffic, why not in a busy seaport like Cebu? In place in Cebu port is a do-it-yourself traffic system. Most of the ships calling Cebu serve the surrounding or nearby islands. The trip takes only a few hours. As such, these ships arrange their departure for them to arrive at their destination and depart on the same evening for them to arrive in Cebu at daybreak. So that the bulk of these ships depart and arrive at the same time. And due to a lack of system or infrastructure to manage traffic, they do it on their own. Now, this is how a do-it-yourself traffic system works. What you are looking at is the response of Sulpicius 7 during the inquiry. Due to the lack of traffic management system, a ship intending to depart makes announcement on the radio of her intention to depart. This vessel would warn all ships not to impede her passage. As she proceeds, she would be on the lookout for traffic that would endanger her, and thus would call the other ships' attention through the radio. Aside from the risk on account of radio failure, this is very risky because once inside the harbor, one of them, in order to give way, has to stop. Stopping entails risks because a vessel without headway has no means of steering and is therefore under the mercy of external forces. Prior to the sinking of MV St. Thomas, the dangers of do-it-yourself traffic management is proven on December 1, 2009, when MV Subic Bay 1 collided with MV Wonderful Stars at the vicinity of the old Mandaue-Mactan Bridge. They, meaning the ships themselves, regulate and manage traffic on their own. I have called on Cebu for quite a few times to know the dangers of this Magellanic system. A vessel traffic management system manages and regulates vessel movement. No vessel could enter, depart, or shift without permission from the traffic control. Traffic control also provides information and updates for the safety of navigation. Vessel speed falls under the power of traffic control. Ship owners Gothong and Roble are at a legal battle when both of them should be aiming their guns against the government for being remiss in their duties. If government people are able to learn from their mistakes, a traffic control should have been in place to regulate speed. Then St. Thomas would still be afloat, making money for its owners, and lives would not have been lost. Traffic control is equipped with radar to monitor and police speed and vessel position so that vessel would stay in their proper lanes. Now, let's go to another problem in the Philippine uh, domestic shipping industry. This is the chart leading to Cebu port. Encircled in red are buoys that mark the danger in the channel. However, I have called on Cebu port twice a month from March to June 2011 to attest that they do not exist. In October 2010, a foreign ship ran aground in Cebu harbor. The blame was put on the captain, but everyone on board agrees that the government has a part in the incident due to the lack of buoys to mark danger areas. I know this because I relieved the captain. In Carmen Port in Danao, also in Cebu, one ship touched bottom while entering the channel. The entrance to the channel is marked by bamboo poles. Storm uprooted them, and when it was time to put the bamboo poles back, they were unable to stick it because the ground was hard. Eventually, they found a soft spot to stick the pole. Unfortunately, it was in the wrong location. This is the first-hand account from one of my crew who was present at the time of the incident. It is wrong, however, to claim that Cebu Harbor has no markers to identify the no-go areas or the danger areas. It still has the unlit timbers, which are remnants of the contemporaries of Magellan. I have called on several ports in the Philippines to attest that modern man-made markers to make navigation safe are sorely missing. I said a while ago that the VTMS would solve the safety of marine navigation in Cebu. No, maybe not. Batangas Port operates under a VTMS. What you are looking at are violations from 2009 to 2010 as reported by Batangas VTMS. By the way, this is from a study conducted by Flora V. Javier and Carlos Aguado of Lyceum of Batangas. Now, let's look at how the researchers interpreted the data. Underlined are what I considered as twisted interpretation of facts because they measure success through the penalties. This is anomalous. The amount of money collected from penalty speaks of the number of violations. In other words, regulations are ignored, rendering Batangas inutile. Effective implementation is measured by the lack of penalties collected because it means adherence to the rules. Should the same thing happen to Cebu, should there be a VTMS in Cebu, nothing would improve. Collision resulting in damaged environment, damage to property and livelihood, and lives lost would still be the norm. Now, this is the recommendation of the authors of this study, which contravenes the findings that VTMS is being implemented effectively. For me, uh, VTMS Batangas is an embodiment of inefficiency and incompetence. VTMS has to be operated by experienced seafarers. The next slide is from a blogger, Mr. Bob Cote. Now we go to the next problem of the Philippine domestic shipping industry. And this is about BMI rules. BMI means Board of Marine Inquiry. It is a branch of the Coast Guard tasked with investigating maritime accidents in the Philippines. What you are looking at is Chapter 16, Section 1604 of BMI Rules and Regulations that sets the qualification of BMI officers. If BMI is getting such criticism, it is due to the lack of technical qualification on merchant ship operation. The rules has no requirement on the length of experience in merchant ship operation. The lack of serious consideration on the requirement of knowledge of merchant ship operations only proved they knew nothing of it. Now, this is the body that investigated the Super Ferry 9 disaster. A good number of them are men in uniform, not belonging to merchant marine. Let me tell you that there are two kinds of merchant marine ship captains. One is a captain who commands a ship, and the other is one who sits behind the desk. These people, as far as I know, are known to each other on the personal level. Schoolmates who call themselves bunkmate. What I wanted to prove here is that in many respects, merchant ship operation follows different pattern compared to that of the Navy. As shown by the UNCLOS regulation, the Navy, due to its nature of operation, has privilege not to observe various regulations that choke the shipping industry. As a consequence, merchant ships observe higher standard in respect to safety and efficiency compared to that of naval ships. Merchant ships engaged in international trade operate under international regulations and standards. Aside from ISM and ISO, audits are oil major inspections to ensure safety and efficiency in tanker ships. On top of these are various port state control inspections to ensure merchant ships adhere to various international conventions. No one has a monopoly of what is right. Ship inspection, nevertheless, is a means of transfer of technology because rectifying every deficiency becomes a learning process. Merchant ship is a commercially oriented operation. As such, ship owners put premium on safety on account of the cost it entails. In turn, it creates safety culture on board merchant ships. Moreover, they, the Navy, do not routinely perform stability calculations as required by merchant ship operation. In other words, they are not technically equipped to investigate accidents involving merchant ships because their consciousness is devoid of any technical knowledge of merchant ship operation. Now let's go back to blogger Bob Cote. What you are looking at is the Mr. Bob Cote's observation or comments on the BMI recommendation following its investigation on the sinking of the Princess of the Stars. This was posted on August 30, 2008. I cut those that I consider less relevant to economize on space and time. The full investigation observation could be found in the site underneath. You can make your observations from here. The next one is a blog from Mr. Rufi Biason. Now let's digress a little bit. Mr. Rufi Biason, if you recall, used to be the customs administrator, and during his term, there were lots and lots of problems. I could only surmise that it could be due to his, shall we call it, inexperience, because he studied as a medical technologist, which has nothing to do with the customs. Was his qualification to sit in the custom because he is a party mate of the president? Anyway, let's proceed. This blog was posted on July 13, 2008. It's the actual recommendation of the BMI, although the numbering is not the actual numbering. And I also have cut the portions I think would not be relevant, but I made sure that I would not be changing the essence of the recommendation. Let's look at recommendation number 2. But again, for clarity, I would like to emphasize that the numbering or the sequencing is not the actual sequencing in the recommendation itself. Now, recommendation number 2 means seafarers in the local trade are not qualified to operate a ship. Recommendation number 3 means Marina and the Coast Guard are not qualified. BMI, remember that BMI is an arm of the Coast Guard. An arm of the Coast Guard saying the Coast Guard is not qualified for its task. Recommendation number 4 is another anomaly. Since 1997, domestic shipping have already adopted ISM. What then is the need to institutionalize ISM in the local shipping trade? Recommendation number 5. RA 9993, known as the Philippine Coast Guard Law of 2009, signed into law in February 2010 and took effect in April 2010, gives the Coast Guard all the power to rectify all that is wrong in the industry. However, the years that followed saw several maritime accidents. The MV St. Thomas sank in 2013. Now the question is, have we benefited from RA 9993, Republic Act 9993? What has the Coast Guard done with its powers on account of RA 9993 to prevent maritime accidents, to prevent accidents at sea? Recommendation number 6 shall be discussed separately because this is a big issue. Recommendation number 7 is correct, but it has to be manned by staff qualified by experience, not by the classroom. Now this is recommendation number 6. If you recall, in Mr. Bob Cote's blog, he mentioned the lack of GMDSS. GMDSS stands for Global Maritime Distress Safety System. As you can see, it is a system with several components. It has 9 functions, 8 of which are for safety, and 1 is for general purposes that includes commercial use. The sinking of the Princess of the Stars could have been averted if GMDSS was in place. Now, this is the sequence of events leading to the sinking of the Princess of the Stars. At this point, the ship has reached a point of no return wherein she should be in direct contact to an agency dedicated to helping vessels in distress. For someone who has spent more than half of his adult life in seafaring, I find it most disgusting that we don't operate GMDSS in the country. We are a maritime nation without any form of infrastructure similar to GMDSS for the purpose of safety of life at sea during adverse weather. Our country, being in a location of path of typhoon, should have made us expert in this regard. But obviously, we are helpless in helping ourselves hurdle this kind of predicament. When Yolanda struck, all means of communication collapsed in the areas affected by the typhoon. A GMDSS, because of its satellite segment, could have been very helpful during this event. Now, one of the requirements of GMDSS is the capacity to receive maritime safety information, commonly known as MSI. MSIs are navigational warnings disseminated to ships by facilities from shore. One such navigational warnings is weather bulletins. Whether good or bad, weather report is sent from shore stations every 4 hours, 24/7. After having called the Philippine ports, I am already aware that such system of navigational warnings does not exist. However, for the purpose of this research, I still need to get an official confirmation whether or not it exists. Hence my query letter to Pagasa that you are looking at right now. When I asked the question stated in my letter, I was told there is none. So, my next question is, how ships receive navigational warnings related to adverse weather? The response came as a big surprise. The response was social media. How can we refer to ourselves as maritime nation when we have not the infrastructure to warn ships on impending risk on account of weather? When at sea, uh, weather information is a matter of life and death. A seafarer worth his or her salt has weather as one of priorities because Safety of the ship depends on it, and we have no means to advise seafarer on weather conditions? This is unbelievable. The next one is from a Coast Guard post. In a maritime nation like ours, and in a modern world, this is the best our government can do to alert vessels of impending risk brought about by typhoon. This is unbelievable. They don't know what they are doing. It's plain incompetence. This is a NAVTEX. NAVTEX stands for Navigational Telex. It is a receiver for receiving navigational warnings, which includes weather bulletins. NAVTEX is a component of GMDSS. Its range is from 250 nautical miles to 400 nautical miles, or about 460 to 740 kilometers. It could be more depending on the condition of radio wave propagation. The information received through NAVTEX is local, meaning to say, if due to favorable radio wave propagation, a ship is in the Philippines receives NAVTEX messages from our neighbors such as Vietnam or Taiwan, those informations, however, would be useless because those informations are local and are intended to ships in those areas only. Meaning to say, NAVTEX messages received from either Taiwan or Vietnam are useless in the Philippines. The reason I'm saying this because in this Coast Guard post, they claim we have NAVTEX. But as I said a while ago, installing NAVTEX on board the ship is not sufficient because the large component of NAVTEX for it to serve its purpose is ashore. NAVTEX machine installed on board ship is only a receiver. NAVTEX messages are gathered ashore so that without shoreside sending information, there is nothing to receive. This is from the same Coast Guard post, which says there is money put into the project. Since there is no NAVTEX, where is the money? That's the question. This is from the same post, Coast Guard post, which says by January 2010, local ships would be operating NAVTEX. I have sailed as a passenger on board a passenger vessel flying between Manila, Iloilo, and Manila, Cagayan, and as a part of this research, I have visited the barges in Pasig River, and true, there are NAVTEX on board those ships. However, they are inoperational simply because the larger component, the shoreside, is missing. The reason why they have NAVTEX machines on board the ships is that they were part of the acquisition when the ship was acquired or purchased from its original owners. Now, since the Coast Guard post mentioned the NTC, the National Telecommunications, I went to the NTC to inquire on the matter. And as you can see, I was directed to Marina. NAVTEX is supposed to be NTC or communication matter, so NTC is supposed to be in charge with it. And in Marina, they also don't know anything about the about NAVTEX. What is at stake is national interest. And as you can see, how Marina, a government agency, uh, deals with the problem highlights the incompetence in the government. Please notice that the advisory is only recent. There was a time in the domestic shipping when communication was made through the single side band or SSB. This is the kind of radio that makes the voice sound like that of a chipmunk. However, that changed when cell phones emerged. They also use emails using broadband. We can now say that communication in domestic shipping is modern. But To the contrary, as a matter of fact, it has become more dangerous, even more dangerous than before. It's hard for me to fathom why no one, not the government, not the ship owners, and not the seafarers, not one of them realized the danger of the present setup. Communication through cell phone and broadband is limited by the range of the signal. Once signal is lost, connection is also lost. There is always a point between the islands when signal is lost. I know, I know this, I have experienced it many times during my call to the Philippines. Suppose an accident occurs, such as fire when the signal is lost, it would be catastrophic. There is no means of communication. There are some local ships that once in a while make trip outside of Philippine waters. They are without any form of long-range radio communication until they are within range of Philippine telephone providers. SSB or single sideband radio are still alive on board domestic ships. But since they are no longer being used, officers in the domestic trade have completely removed it from their consciousness. I know this because I have been interviewing barges in Pasig River and they don't know it exists. Also, I have sailed as passenger in 2013 and the officer I have asked took time to locate the SSB on his ship, meaning to say he doesn't know it exists. For an SSB to become part of an emergency communication, first there has to be arrangement among ship owners, the government, and radio providers. Second, the crew has to be trained by periodical testing of the device. In other words, there has to be a procedure or process or protocol before SSB become part of radio communication during emergency. SSB, unlike GMDSS, is terrestrial based. Now, this is how the government responded to the spate of sea accidents during President Ramos's time. It only shows nobody knows what they're doing. Why? Look at the function that the commission is supposed to perform. It's very obvious that there are no specifics. It's the work of someone who knew nothing about merchant ship operation. Look at the members of the commission. With the exception of few at the lower level of professional seafarers, the top guns are bureaucrats whose knowledge with maritime industry are hearsay. Since its inception in 1996, what good has it done? Merchant ship operation is grossly underestimated, believing anyone is qualified to decide on it. Ship owners are part of the problem. One of the findings during the investigation of the sinking of the Princess of the Stars was the life jackets that do not serve their purpose because they are not of approved type. And this was how Marina responded, with a circular requiring life jackets to be of approved type. And this is the response of the ship owners. They are against it. They are vehemently against safety. This is beyond comprehension because safety saves money. Let's take some time to understand how a life jacket works. Not all life jackets are the same. Cheap ones, meaning uncertified, those which are commonly seen in beaches and pools are toys. These are toys. They are for fun only. Survival at sea requires that a person assumes a fetal position or the health position as seen on the illustration. The said position makes the body diagonal to the surface of the water and not perpendicular. As such, life jackets used on board ships are designed to lift the chest because lifting the chest consequently lifts the face and the nose away from the water. Therefore, the design of these life jackets are such that the floater is placed only in the chest area and none at the back or shoulders. These life jackets may have headrests but not for the purpose of lifting the head. Having a floater in the back lifts the back, thereby countering the lifting effect of the floater in the chest area. As a consequence, the person in the water may float face down as described in the news excerpt. Life jackets of approved type certainly costs more compared to those without government or class approval. But these are for the purpose of saving lives and not for playing. If the price of foreign-made ones are prohibitive, why not develop locally made life jackets that would save life? Local ship owners are myopic. They consider the cost of purchasing this equipment, but not the cost when accident strikes. This is now the explanation on why the two vessels that collided on August 16, 2013 in Lewis Ledge were not on safe speed. As you can see, the sea lane they were sailing on is fraught with danger. If this were a car, they are in the marketplace. Now, Rule 6 of Colreg's safe speed compels them to be sailing on safe speed. In simple terms, safe speed means speed that is controllable. So why are the ships not in safe speed? Ships get orders or the instructions from ship owners. And the concern of ship owners, their primary concern, is money. For a ship to sail in safe speed whenever she is in a harbor area, she has to use diesel oil and not fuel oil. Diesel oil is twice costlier compared to that of fuel oil. Ship owners therefore save a lot of money when using fuel oil. Time is money in the shipping business, so that the other reason for speeding up is that faster turnaround is good for business. The ship has to be on the move all the time. Reducing speed means lost revenue. But as we have seen, they are flirting with disaster, which is thousandfold more expensive. A wise ship owner or ship operator is aware of the risk in steaming at full speed in this situation. However, money outweighs all the risk it entails. So we have come to the conclusion of our investigation, and let's wrap it up with these recommendations. Number one is the same recommendation as what the BMI had, but the important component of this one is that it has to be run or managed by an experienced seafarer. Recommendation number two, same thing, to be managed by experienced seafarer. The rest of the recommendations are self-explanatory, but just for emphasis, I would strongly suggest replacing or abolishing BMI.